Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show. I got shipping notification on my first product.
Ooh.
It's the poster. I'm pretty excited about it.
Very exciting.
I've got a place for it in my office and everything.
That's awesome. Did you get the big one or the little one?
Please. A gentleman does not truck in small posters. No, I got the big one. Well, it's medium. They didn't even let us do a big one.
Right.
So it's the biggest available. But I'm pretty excited about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Have you ordered anything yet? Because you're kind of the figurehead of the show. So one would think that you would jump right on.
I've been waiting to sit down with my wife and go through it so we can all pick stuff and order together.
Oh.
And it was just not one of those weeks to do that.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Yeah.
It was a good week. You know what I watched? I'm a little embarrassed.
Ooh.
First of all, let me just get this out front. I have had so much coffee today that it should qualify as substance abuse.
Nice.
My wife is out of town, and I just kept making pots of coffee. And so me and the 4 people I drank enough coffee for are pretty thrilled to be here. Now,
Awesome.
what was I saying? The movie I watched this week, besides all the other movies that we're talking about on the show that I watched, was Hot Tub Time Machine 2.
Oh, I didn't see the second one.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay having to
It's okay.
that
You
one.
know what? You did. You have seen it. You may not think you've seen it, but you've seen it.
I see.
Yeah. No, there were some funny bits, but mostly not. The kid, the younger guy,
Right?
I can't think of his name. He's funny.
Is he?
He's funnier in this one than he was in the first one. He has a little bit bigger role.
Well, yeah. I mean, I liked him in the what is the thing with him in this one?
He's they go into the future, into an alternate Back to the Future. It's a Back to the Future 3 alternate timeline future past thing.
Okay.
Where they're in the future, but actually a guy from an
right.
alternate past came and there's an assassination attempt and he was shot in the bits and pieces. And they put him in the time machine tub time machine, and they tried to send him back in the future, but apparently, according to Chevy Chase, the hot tub time machine, it doesn't send you where you want to go. It sends you where you need to go. And in this case, they went to an alternate timeline where the hot tub time machine doesn't exist, where it's just a hot tub.
Wow.
And you know, it's craziness ensues. I don't even know how else. Yeah, I mean, it's just, craziness that you've seen.
I feel like I'm okay.
Oh, yeah, totally. Okay, I think that goes without saying. What about you? Do you have anything good going on this week?
I watched The Revenant, and
I heard about this. Tough
really
one.
Enjoyed.
Was it tough?
It's pretty brutal, but man, is it good.
Is it his kid? Does he have a kid that gets eaten by a bear? Is that kind of how it works?
Nope.
That's pretty much what I think about the movie.
There is a bear. There is a kid.
Not his kid.
Really...
Okay.
No, it's his kid. It's his kid.
Oh. But his kid is
he's
what?
Got a kid.
Shot. He's
His kid-
shot
No,
by a
his kid's
projectile.
His kid
He's
is not
crushed
shot,
by a rock.
nor touched by a bear.
Crushed by a stone. Disease. There's a disease.
That's the Black Plague.
There's a meteor. A very small little asteroid. Heat vision. Someone has heat vision. Am I close?
Gosh, you're just getting
Gingivitis. Plaque. Gum
Dental
disease.
disease. There was a killer back
Worms. Some sort of gut worm. Alien.
then. Just keep on going,
See?
man. Keep on going. Yep.
Caffeine, baby.
No, it's a great movie, and what really blows me away is just watching the camera work in that film and the way that Iñárritu stitches shots together like he did in Birdman.
He does this thing where he has a cameraman and the guy has a camera and they just go ahead and push him off a cliff following a horse is what I see.
That's in there. And there's just some amazing stuff in there that clearly there's no way a camera could do the things that it's doing. But it's exhilarating to watch, and it's just proof that you don't have to cut action like Michael Bay does, or even Paul Greengrass for that matter, and you can still make it incredibly exhilarating. And so I was very excited watching the film. Just a wonderful film. DiCaprio is fantastic. The score is gorgeous. Everything about it really is top notch.
Well, I appreciate your review of it, and it makes me want to see it even a little bit more. And I was sort of willing to let this go. You think this is one I need to hit in the theaters for sure?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Bigger
when I watched
and
it, I was
louder,
like,
the better?
This is the film that should have been shot in 70 millimeter, not Hateful Eight.
Yep.
But then this is also a film that could never have actually been shot in super 70 millimeter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too amazing. The camera work is just too fantastical to be done with an actual film camera.
See, I thought that was supposed to make us mad.
No.
When you have unbelievable camera movements. I thought we were supposed to be angry at that now as purists. Are we not purists?
No, I kind of go with the wind.
Just looking for a ruling, not finding one. I think we need to probably tell people where we're from.
Yes, where are we from?
This is The Next Reel on rashpixel.fm, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that right there is Andy Nelson.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, more from our longtime friend of the show, David Mamet, and his work as a screenwriter this week with 1987 mob classic The Untouchables. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show on iTunes or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. And hey, you ever pushed a baby carriage down the stairs to see if a hunky cop of questionable heritage would catch it on his calf? Then you should head over to The Next Reel's Instagram, hashtag ponyprize, hashtag guess the movie challenge.
And with that, let's hop on a plane to the Scottish border, where our very own Stephen Smart is on a stakeout in the middle of nowhere, hoping to stop an illegal shipment of Irish whiskey from getting across.
Hey guys. This week we jump to 1945 with the colourful noir Leave Her to Heaven, starring Gene Tierney, Cornel Wilde and Vincent Price. At the other Scotty nailed it on Image 2, making it 2 weeks in a row, so congrats, and you're entered once again into the Pony Prize hat. And just a quick reminder that new challenges now start on Mondays. So thanks guys, and see you later.
We got some more follow-up from our dear friend Ben Lott, writing in with the Blot Spot about The Verdict.
I love courtroom dramas, and I think Paul Newman was great in The Verdict. I didn't like the subplot of the awkward romance, which seemed to come out of nowhere for no reason, but when it ended up weaving into the main plot, I was pleased. I think there were some huge legal loopholes that this movie didn't properly address, but if you can accept the fairy tale legal logic of the movie, it works just fine. My only complaint would be that the ending was a quiet one that focused on character, when I would have enjoyed a more celebratory ending that gave us a cathartic moment to cheer when he won the case. Your rank 132, my rank 49.
I think what I'm reading in that is the subtext is, Pete, you ruined this for me and Andy.
I think so. If the ranking went my way.
Yeah. That's what I read. He was very delicate in his review of The Verdict, but that's what I read. That's what I heard.
Very funny.
Special thanks to Optimulus, who wrote in on Letterboxd about our review of The Verdict. Great episode and a good film selection. I like the film in general, but while the jury's verdict felt earned, their request to increase the compensation felt a bit off to me. And, you know, I don't know. I actually like that part. I think that's where we came down to. I kind of like the money bit. Did that feel off to you?
Well, only in the sense that, you know, the ending just feels a little off.
Yeah, let's just say the ending is on. Does the money part make it worse?
It doesn't make it worse for me. I think if anything, it at least gives me a sense that there's more justice. But I think I think that all of that could have felt better. Even the money part, I think that could have felt better if there was that more celebratory Hollywood type of ending. I think it would have made me a little happier, and maybe Optimulus as well.
Well, thank you, Optimulus, for writing in from Letterboxd. We appreciate the comments coming in from over there. And I think with that, it is time, Andrew, let's do trailers.
I'm pretty excited for my trailer, Pete.
Yeah, you would be.
The Conjuring 2. The Enfield Poltergeist.
I don't
Did you see the first one? Did you try
it? No, I didn't see the first one.
The story of Ed and Lorraine.
Crying out loud. Go on, do your spiel.
I think it's really interesting that James Wan has tapped into this kind of quote unquote true stories from Lorraine and Ed Warren, where they try helping families with poltergeists that are bothering them. The first film I thought was a lot of fun. The second film, they go to North London to help a single mother who's raising 4 children alone in a house plagued by malicious spirits. And it just, I love this couple. I think that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are a great couple. They both look so good in these films. I think that James Wan has kind of found a muse with Patrick Wilson. I think they work really well together, and I love seeing them working here in these movies. I think that James Wan has really been crafting some strong films in the horror genre, and I think that he also has done really well for himself as far as sequels. I think that he has proven that he can make a sequel that doesn't end up falling apart. He did a great job with Insidious 2. He did a great job with Furious 7. And I think this one looks just downright creepy. And I'm pretty excited to see this one. What about you?
I'm not excited about it at all. When the crosses all turn upside down and there's actually a dude living in the wallpaper, I was done. I was done and resented this pick from you. So I'm glad that this film exists so that it can satisfy other people's need for this kind of stuff. It's too freaky. Too much. Too freaky.
To you, Pete. My gift.
I can't believe Vera Farmiga. I hold her in such high esteem, and then she goes and she does things like this. I'm like, I can't have her for dinner.
And Bates Motel, like she's into this stuff. I love it.
I know it's not good.
It's great.
Ugh. What'd you think of mine? Did you see mine?
Oh, this opens June 10th.
Okay, well,
2016.
I'll be out of town.
I'll be dragging you to the theater. I'm going to drug you and carry you to the theater and put you in the seat so the drugs wear off just as the movie starts. What do you think of that?
I think that's terrible. Is it going to be, you're going to do the drug that makes me keep my eyes open? Like
right. It'll numb your body. Your body won't be able to move at all.
What was the serpent and the rainbow drug?
Yes.
You're gonna do a little voodoo.
Exactly.
I don't like that. Did you watch mine?
I did.
Kind of a funky trailer. I'm talking about Colonia. This is from director Florian Gallenberger, written by Gallenberger and Torsten Wenzel. And it stars Daniel Bruhl and Michael Nyqvist and Emma Watson, among others. And I don't think I have it figured out. I can't tell from the trailer what kind of a film this is going to be. And I think that's probably a good thing. It's Emma Watson joins a cult to go find her political rabble-rouser of a boyfriend. And that's pretty much all I've got. But the cult, the whole environment of the cult, it starts with them and their relationship, and there's a political uprising in the streets, and then they get caught by the state. And I don't quite understand the mechanics of who's on what side. But once she joins the cult, I'm in. I think it looks like a really taut little bit of cultist thriller, and I like that. So I'm willing to give it a shot. It should be said, however, that I also have been just reminded this week that I predicted good things about Child 44. So that's on the table. What'd you think?
It's funny because I find the actual first part of the film or the trailer more interesting, and then once she goes to the camp, I find it less interesting. The first part reminded me a bit of Costa Gavras' Missing, which I thought was a pretty interesting film, and then the second part, I don't know if it's going to be kind of I don't know. It's not quite Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, but it's a little bit of that. We're getting that creepy vibe of the cult, and you've got, looks like a great leader for the cult. Michael Nyqvist looks like he's going to do a great job there. But it seems like it's kind of blending a couple different things going on here. So I'm curious to see. I have a feeling it's one of those movies where it's going to be more of the cult and the opening bit in the trailer, like the first half of the trailer is really probably like the first, it's probably the first sequence in the film.
Yeah,
it just jumps into
pretty linear. Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably what it's like. You know what I really like, though, is I like that Emma Watson has truly, I think, really found her professional sort of sea legs after Harry Potter. I mean, she's done some really interesting stuff, and this looks like just another chance for her to pick a project that is, out of her character. And I'm excited for that for her. I think that's great.
I think the best thing that came out of the Harry Potter franchise is that they found some amazing young actors.
Yep.
And I'm always blown away that the leads from that franchise, have never really strayed, and they just keep cranking out interesting things.
Oh, and what's the one we just talked about? It was the Moonwalker, I think, right, with Rupert Grint.
Yeah,
that looks fantastic and weird and awesome, and Harry Potter, what Daniel Radcliffe has done, just awesome thing after awesome thing. Even if it doesn't turn out to be an awesome movie, he seems to have a good head for projects that showcase his uniquenesses.
Yeah, Victor Frankenstein. I mean, I heard it wasn't very good,
Yeah.
but it looked interesting.
It did look interesting.
He'll be in Now You See Me Too.
Yeah, Now You See Me Too. That's right. So I think it's great. I think you're absolutely right. And I like watching these kids grow up. I think that's really fun. So
Here.
no idea when this thing opens. It's on the trailer circuit right now. It says it opens in Russia March 31st. Germany, February 18th. Switzerland, in the German-speaking region. And the Zurich Film Festival was in September. So it's out there. It's been out there since late 2015, but no idea when it's going to hit the U.S. Here endeth the lesson.
I grew up in a tough neighborhood. Sometimes reputation follows you.
Robert De Niro is Al Capone.
There is violence in Chicago, of course, but not by me and not by anybody I employ, and I'll tell you why, because it's not good business.
Kevin Costner is Elliot Ness.
I have sworn to put this man away with any and all legal means at my disposal, and I will do so.
Sean Connery is Jimmy Malone.
You want to get Capone? Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. You just joined the Treasury Department, son. Everybody knows where the booze is. The problem isn't finding it.
Let's do some good!
The problem is who wants to cross Capone.
Somebody messes with me, I'm gonna mess with him.
The Untouchables. Andrew, have you heard of this film?
I think I have.
It's an interesting one. 1987, I think is the word on the street for this one.
So they say.
So they say. It's a Brian De Palma joint. You know how we feel about that.
We have talked about a few of his films before.
We sure have. He's got an interesting swing for me. Got a real love-hate relationship with De Palma.
Me too.
This one is, of course, is the story of a highly fictionalized tale of federal agent, Treasury agent Elliot Ness and his crusade to take down Al Capone in Chicago in 1930. It stars Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, Charles Martin Smith, Andy Garcia, and Robert De Niro as the Beaver, Al Capone. We're talking about this film because it is part of the catalog of films that was written by David Mamet, and this is our Written by David Mamet series.
Right.
Okay. So let's just start with Mamet, get out of the gate before we dig into some of the details. I think this is an area that you and I disagree. I find this film more of a case of there is more Mamet in this film than there was in the film we talked about last week, The Verdict. Do you agree on that point at all?
No.
Okay. See, I think there is, and I think it is pretty much whenever Connery opens his mouth or De Niro opens his mouth. I think there are some sequences when there is some good Mamet, and I love those pieces, those segments. Unfortunately, it's not enough to make this feel enough like a Mamet film for me, and that hurts my feelings. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, well, here's the thing. When I say I don't feel like it's a Mamet, it doesn't feel like a Mamet script. I don't hear it. That really boils down to Mamet speak. And if we go back to the films that we watched that were specifically written and directed by him, Red Belt and
Spanish
Prisoner, those definitely have Mamet speak.
Absolutely.
All the way through. The way that people talk, the way that the pacing of the dialogue is, that is, to me, really helps define a Mamet script. Now, that being said, I think there's a lot more that Mamet can do in a script than just Wright and Mamet speak. And that's what I think he did bring to the table in The Verdict, and I do feel he actually does bring it to the table here. I think that stories of men in difficult situations is definitely something that, oddly, we really kind of explore in all four of the films that we're going to be talking about in this particular series. I don't think we particularly planned that, but looking at them, that's definitely the case.
That's true.
And,
yeah.
And I think that is something that he does write well. I think that he enjoys writing these situations with characters, and it seems to be male characters who are in these sorts of difficult situations and trying to navigate. And I think that he does a great job with that. I think he does give the characters great speeches. I enjoy the speeches in both of the films. I think that I think that the character development is less in this film than it was in The Verdict. I enjoyed the down on his luck character. I felt like there was a lot more character growth in The Verdict. Here, I didn't find it really any growth, but I don't know if I pin that to Mamet. I'm not quite sure yet, but focusing specifically on him, I do feel like there are elements here that are his. I just don't feel like it feels as much his as some of the stuff that he wrote and directed himself.
This is one of those funny things where in this case, he's kind of a, he comes in, he writes the script and he hands it over, and he's got kind of the Sorkin vibe, the stuff we're seeing from Sorkin right now. He kind of takes ownership of the property and he develops it as his thing. And even De Palma says, this was Mamet's thing. He took some of my ideas in the script, but mostly he ditched them, and this was his thing. And and this was shortly after the film came out, like a month after the film came out. He's, De Palma was saying this was Mamet's script. And so it very much tells, I think, it is the cultural mirror that Mamet wants us to see about these, as you say, male characters that are in difficult situations. The problem that I have with it is it feels so much like, and maybe it's because Mamet didn't direct it, but it feels very much like this movie is exactly the sum of its parts and no more. There is no magic for me that happens at the intersection between an otherwise compelling cast, a compelling director, and a compelling screenwriter. It is a Venn diagram of three circles that either overlap very, very faintly, if at all. And that is the problem that I have on this viewing of the film. It is just it's pretty staid for me, and doesn't really hold up as much as my memory had carried it.
Yeah, same here. And I looked at Roger Ebert's review, and I kind of agree with what he wrote. He said the script is by David Mamet, the Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, but it could have been by anybody. It doesn't have the Mamet touch, the conversational rhythms that carry a meaning beyond words. That's, I think, the key here is the subtext. Yeah. There's not much. It also lacks any particular point of view about the material and, in fact, lacks the dynamic tension of many gangster movies written by less talented writers. Everything seems cut and dried, twice told, preordained. And yeah. I think that sums it up very nicely.
I think so too. I think so too. It doesn't, and that's kind of a sad way to start this conversation. But it takes us into this next point, which is, and something we've talked about, I think, fairly frequently of late. Not to bring in Sorkin too much, but this was much of the Jobs script was caught up in this, in the same sort of turmoil around historical accuracy. When we say it's a fictionalized story of this person, it is a fiction. Right? It's not just a fictionalized story, it is a fiction. So as far as this film tells a story of real people and real crime, it is far from a documentary.
I think that the thing that I'm finding, there's a real struggle about making films that are based on true stories, because it's very different telling a true story and, or I should say, telling a story of truth as far as what really happened versus telling a true story in a film. You're going to have a very hard time finding the right way to make those two come together perfectly. You're always going to have to fictionalize. And I just really don't think there's much of a way around it. And I'm just starting to feel like, there comes a point where when you're making a film and it happens to be about real people, there's just this line where it's like, you know what, it's pretty much always going to be fictionalized. If you want to find out more about the real stuff, just watch a documentary about it. I just don't think in the world of film, in narrative storytelling, that you're really ever going to get all of the truth that you should. Or maybe the better way to say it is, you can watch it and get a sense of kind of what happened, but don't in any circumstance start looking at that as that is exactly how it really happened.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting one. I'm with you, and I totally agree. I think you're absolutely right. The thing that bites a little bit on this film is and I can let go of so much for the narrative joy of the story and the visual joy of the story. But the fact that this is a story about Ness and Capone, really, I mean, this is setting up against this. This is the fight between these two dogs, and it's Elliot Ness of the Treasury and it's Al Capone of the mob, and it's set at a time in which the real guys never even knew each other. Right? It was Ness going after Capone and didn't even meet Capone, didn't know him. They weren't even in the same town during the period when this movie was made. I did not know that, and that before I watched the film this time, and that actually made this viewing worse. Right? It just feels sort of ridiculous that this is it really is a fiction. And so if I let go of that, I really enjoy the film. Much more than I do if I look at it as a attempt to tell the story of what really happened. So
I guess the line there is, I mean, it's not like this film opens saying based on a true story,
no,
or anything like that. It's not like it's spelling out for us, this is kind of what really happened. It doesn't give that to us. I mean,
it doesn't.
Right
and
away,
only you have to dig in and discover that this was based on Ness's book, telling his story, that it was loosely adapted by Mamet, and that's about as far as it goes. You're right. There are no promises made that this is telling a true story.
Yeah, and I think it's a little far-fetched to even say that that Mamet's script was based on the original book. I think that his script was more inspired by the actual TV show. I mean, I don't he probably went back and looked at the book, but I don't think that was the focus. I mean, from what I heard when De Palma was talking about it, they went back and looked at the TV show and were like, well, we don't want to do that. So let's just take that story and play with it a little bit. And I mean, it's really just because the studio owned the I think it was who was it, Fox? Now I'm forgetting what the studio was.
You're talking about the original show?
No, the studio that made this movie. It was Fox.
It was Fox, yeah.
They had the TV show as well, and they wanted to do something with it. And so they're like, well, hey, let's make a TV show or a movie out of the TV show. And they gave it to De Palma and his producer Art Linson and David Mamet. And they're like, well, here, write it. And they're like, man, we don't want to do this TV show, but we'll play around with it a little bit. And the film was born. And it's not accurate, but, it's still enjoyable. And I think you're right. You got to walk that line of enjoyable versus looking at it for a documentary truth.
And it was Paramount,
like I said.
Exactly. Okay, so that, roughly out of the way, there are a couple of major historical points of fact that were not addressed in the film, and some of the big ones that people have gotten fired up about. In particular, this is a movie that is reasonably violent. There's some good gunfights, some big gun battles, and half of the Untouchables, as portrayed in this film, half of the team of 4 were killed in the course of this film, and in fact, none of the Untouchables were ever murdered in reality. The big goon, the big thug for Capone, Frank Nitti. At the end, the big climax of the film is Costner's Ness really being overwhelmed by a rage rush at the death of his friend, and he throws Nitti off the roof of the courthouse downtown and kills him, and that never happened. And so Nitti actually committed suicide after he found out he was indicted for tax income evasion the second time. This is after he took over for Capone when Capone went to jail. So, those are the two big ones. When I read the Amazon comments, those are the two big ones that really stand out that folks are fired up about, the historical folks are fired up about. If you don't know those things, then they don't matter, and you can just look at the movie. Would you say, was there anything else in there that felt like was a major historical point that was missed?
I mean, there's time compression and stuff like that. I don't think there's anything else that I'm aware of, but it's not it's not something that I'm looking at. I'm not tackling it because of its historical accuracy. Right. So I'm not one of the people complaining on Amazon, I guess.
You are certainly not one of the people. So let's talk about Mr. De Palma.
Yeah, I think you're right. I kind of agree with you. Definitely have a big love-hate swing with him. But I think I've said this before. The thing that I love about De Palma is he's always just hitting for the rafters. He's just, is that the expression? I'm just making expressions up now.
Well, where do you hit? You hit out of the park. He's trying to hit out of the park. He's trying to call his shots. I think that's a thing.
What's the rafters expression?
I don't know. Where do you do that? That's a bat. A bat rafters. Would be in your belfry. Rat in your rafters. I don't know.
He's always batting for the belfry.
No.
Anyway,
how about he's taking chances?
He is always willing to try things, and I really like that about him. And he goes big, and sometimes it works well, and sometimes it really doesn't work. But he's always doing it, and that's the thing I really, really like and respect about De Palma.
I do too, and I think there are some cases in here that I think he really he nails it on the taking chances thing. First of all, one of the things I noticed right away, and I'm glad you caught as well, is the use of split diopter. My goodness, it's everywhere in this film.
Yeah, he likes playing around with camera techniques, and that's something that he's always done. And you can just see that in everything. I mean, whether it's doing split screen or whether it's interesting camera work. I mean, here he's got some great shots that are bird's eye view, looking straight down on Capone. Like I think the opening shot of Capone
getting
when you
shaved,
see him, right? He's getting his shave, and he does that, and it's great to see him really experimenting and trying new things. He does the split diopter. The one that's really noticeable for me is the church when we have Malone and Ness talking, and it's kind of the come to Jesus conversation.
You send one of his to the morgue.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And you get that great split diopter with Costner's face just huge on the right side of the screen. And then you've got Connery's face just a little farther back. And it's nice to see how he's playing around with that.
I agree. The other one, which felt ahead of its time in this case, was the first person POV. That what I have come to think of as the doom shot. Remember
totally.
the first person shooter, which was just made as a first person shooter. That was the creeper cam, right? Which ended up being. I don't think I'd ever seen it before, but in this case, we have a number of times where the camera takes different perspectives, and I think that's one of the unique things is that each time we see it, it's from a different perspective. It could be one of the thugs who's creeping around outside somebody's house, looking through his eyes as he's sneaking and peeking through windows, or it could be through Ness himself and his eyes as he's trying to make sense of the world around him. But in either case, I think it really makes for a compelling kind of narrative break where it's just jarring enough to help you integrate what you're seeing on screen in a way that I think just watching the characters walk through it doesn't work quite as well.
It definitely is something that De Palma likes to use. I mean, we have seen it before. I mean, he used it in Blowout.
That's right. That's right.
At the opening with the creeper.
No, you're absolutely
in the
right.
movie that they're putting together.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that he likes to play around with. And it seems, I think the thing about the technique is that it seems to fit more in the early horror genre at that period. And it wasn't something that you saw as much in this type of film.
So do you think it makes this film look cheap?
No, I mean, I think it's an interesting technique. I think that De Palma takes these techniques and tries to play around with them in new ways. And granted, it's not a technique that you can really play around in a hugely new way. I mean, a POV shot is a POV shot. However, I think that he plays with it nicely in the particular scene when this guy is stalking Malone through his house. You get a nice sense of that creepiness. And I think it works well in that particular scene because we like Malone. We don't want to see him get killed. And we've built to that relationship. So I don't find it cheap. I think it actually works nicely. And I think it leads to a great finale of that also.
Yeah, I think so too. So
painful.
How does the violence sit with you?
I don't have a problem with it. It's definitely De Palma violence. I mean, he is a violent filmmaker. He likes putting a lot of stuff up on the screen, and he certainly does it here. Whether it's De Niro beating a guy's head in with a baseball bat, and or like we see when Malone gets riddled with bullets from a Tommy gun.
Very splashy. Lots of splashes.
Apparently, Connery did not realize that this was his first time ever getting squibs put on him, and apparently he was a little paranoid about it. And when the squibs went off, he got a bunch of dust and fake blood in his eyes and had to be rushed to the hospital and everything. And De Palma actually had to really, really work hard to convince him to do another take because Connery was so pissed off.
Oh man, that's you tell Connery that first.
They told him he'd never done it. He had no idea what to expect. Wow. I mean, his type of filmmaking was very, very British, and it was all it's kind of. I think that he fit with the just kind of that old school acting where it's like I'm just acting. You don't have to get into it. This method stuff is nonsense. I think that they just they found an easier way to act just by performing without having to really be the character or anything.
One thing on the particular violence, the baseball bat to the head thing is lauded as one of the more historically accurate components of the film, and that in fact it was something that Capone did, not just to one guy at a lavish dinner table, but three. So
it's funny how sources are so different on things like this. Like I read it was 2.
Oh,
but it may or may not have been Capone. History.
History is awesome.
Speaking of accuracy, this show's full of it.
Talk to me about the Battleship Potemkin.
Again, another Brian De Palma thing. He loves putting in homages to other films and filmmakers, and the Odessa Steps sequence from Battleship Potemkin he certainly steals from for the scene with the staircase at the train station. It's a really fun homage. I think that Terry Gilliam did it better in Brazil, particularly because it actually tied into some of the theme that was going on in Battleship Potemkin. You don't get that here. It's just visually kind of tied in. And I like that. I think it's a really fantastic sequence, and I think that it hits a great point in the film to kind of help build some of that tension. I just don't feel that it really says, "Hey, I'm paying this homage to Battleship Potemkin," because it really ties in thematically. It was just more of a visual homage, and that's fine too.
That's fine too. It is, it helps for the film to stand on some of the iconic sequences, and this one in particular is one you see in all of the reels. When you're talking about classic films, the baby carriage falling down the steps, and there are so many players, and it's all in slow motion, and it's very much a chess game up and down these steps until we get to the actual shooting, and the classic. Finally leveraging Andy Garcia's stone and his just dead shot. What do you call him? Gunnery? He's a pistolero.
Pistolero.
That's the word I'm looking for. Anyway, he's a great shot. He's a dead shot, right? He is a great shot, and we learned this about him earlier in the film. And he finally gets a chance. He saves the baby carriage. He's on his back. He's got his arm extended with this little gun, and he is just locked on to the guy who's holding the accountant up at the top of the stairs. And Ness says, "You got him?" And he says, "Yeah, I got him." And he says, "Take him." And he takes the shot, and that is the perfect triangle, and it's visually beautiful, and it's aesthetically beautiful, and it's violently beautiful, and all of that is the shot that you remember. It's the sequence that you remember from the movie, and the film stands on sequences like that.
It really does, and I think that again goes back to the script that we were talking about earlier. It fails on the structure. I don't feel that there's a strong arc for the characters. I don't feel the storytelling is here. It's not tied together nicely. Like you said, it's just kind of scene after scene after scene of things put together, which it's nice to watch and it's fun. But when you step back away from it, it kind of just, it falls apart. Nothing is glued together. But these sequences, they are fantastic. The train station sequence is one of them.
The train station, when Ness throws Nitty off the roof.
The whole rooftop chase. Yeah, that's great.
Did he sound something like that? Which is great as Nitty is screaming on the way down. And the final punchline to that, where's Nitty? He's in the car after falling 10 stories into the roof of a car. That I think is great. De Niro has some great rage sequences. I want him dead. I want his family dead. He's got some great delivery. And then the film goes to Canada on horseback. Andy, it is the most ridiculous 20 minutes of a gangster film that I feel like I've seen. It's awful. It's awful.
That's so funny. I don't think it's awful. I don't really have the problem with it. In fact, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the sequence in Canada that I actually do like. It's not my favorite sequence, but I don't hate it.
I hate it. I really do. I hate it. I think it's ridiculous. Although, interestingly, Mamet, as a playwright, the sequence in the cabin before the shootout and the chase feels as much like a play as anything that I have seen on screen from Mamet in this film. It is very much staged. You can tell that there is literally the fourth wall has been taken off and it's just like laterally shot. That whole sequence it reminded me of just the way he staged the actors, with Connery sitting at the table sort of majestically and the others standing at opposite windows in different planes. It felt very, very much like a stage shot.
Well, and the other part of the sequence that I think is fantastic is the bookend to that scene when they're back in the cabin after the big shootout, when we have caught the bookkeeper and there's this other dead guy there. I think that sequence is fantastic, and how Connery plays it, or Malone, I should say, by taking this dead body that the other guy doesn't know is dead and threatening him and blowing his head off without making the other guy think that Malone is just insane and ready to kill, and using that as a tool to get this guy to turn. I thought that was just fantastic. I think that's one of the strongest moments that in the story. I think it really took it for a different spin that I wasn't expecting. I never, I should say, I'm always surprised by that part. I think it's really the scene that gives me the most for characters in this.
I agree with that, and I think that as a tool of threat is really good. I didn't need to go to Canada in a cabin to experience it, and I think that's the piece that throws me.
And I completely agree with you there. I don't think that had to happen. I think that it very, very easily could have been something else. It's just. But I do like that scene, and so if it were in a bar in the back of some seedy alley in Chicago, that would have been just as fine too.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you about the Canadian scene. I feel like it just kind of. I mean, it's an interesting scene, and I like it, but all of a sudden it just feels like they step into a Western, and it feels a little like they kind of took it on a weird turn. Plus, I feel like the whole gag with the Mounties kind of coming in early and all that. Just, it feels like sloppy writing to me.
Yeah, it really does. It felt like slapstick, and I was not interested in that. But that's not the only place that sort of the film starts to kind of fall apart. I mean, we've talked about this, the whole concept of transformation in the film. Who changes in this film?
Exactly. Nobody.
Really. And the biggest point, the biggest call to action, and the the most I think compelling argument for a character that grows happens only about 18 minutes into the film.
And
that's pretty much the end.
Yeah, when Connery changes from, he wants to live, from being this beat cop who's gone, or cop who's gone back to being a beat cop because he just wants to live. He doesn't want to be in a situation where he's going to die. And then he has this transformation where all of a sudden he's going to kind of go kick butt and help bring down Capone. It happens so early on in the film. That's our only transformation in the story. It's just, there's nothing there that helps drive the story. We've got a goody two-shoes and we've got a really bad guy, and they maintain that all the way through. Nobody changes. It just is good versus bad all the way through, and good triumphs. And I guess you could argue that Kevin Costner's character has to start breaking the law and doing things that he doesn't agree with in order to actually bring down Capone, which he actually says when he's talking to the judge at the end. He says, I've had to break every law that I've ever believed in, and blah, 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 blah. But we don't see that. I mean, none of the stuff that he's doing from our perspective seems like he's really breaking the law. And that's I think the stumbling block in trying to build a character transformation with Ness, where yes, he's actually he's making choices that are difficult because they're illegal. We don't see that happen, and that's the problem. He says it, but we never see that, and so hence there is no transformation.
And I wonder how much of this is based on my contention that Kevin Costner is not an actor of the caliber to be able to pull it off.
I don't think it's in the script. I think that, regardless of Kevin Costner and our opinions on him in this particular film, I just don't think it was in the script.
I think he couldn't pull it off. You may be right, but so am I.
I think we're both right in this particular case. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other people that were considered for this role, I mean, it makes it, doesn't it make it give you that sort of bitter taste in your mouth when you watch it?
This, like I said, this is the first time where I do kind of agree with you as far as calling him Kevin 2x4 Costner. I mean, I really enjoy Kevin Costner. I do. But in this particular film, I just have a really hard time with him. And I think it's because he is playing such a goody two-shoes that is just so poorly written, so flat. I just don't think there's anything he can bring to the table with this. But then I do feel that some of these other actors could have actually done something at least a little more interesting with it. Mickey Rourke, Michael Douglas, Don Johnson, Mel Gibson, Harrison Ford, Jack Nicholson, Jeff Bridges, Gene Hackman, William Hurt, Tom Berenger, Nick Nolte. All of them could have, I thought, done something a little more interesting with the part. Totally
agree. I think it and even in that regard, I think, we're talking a little bit about the cast. I sort of working up from the bottom, if we can, in terms of the Untouchables. Andy Garcia, okay. Andy Garcia and Charles Martin Smith, I think, are probably the best cast Untouchables on the list of the four. I think Andy Garcia's sort of, he's soft-spoken. He clearly has a mission in life, and over the course of the film, his big transformation is he learns to cry.
Right.
But he is the one I am most interested in sort of keeping up with. Like he's sort of the muscle, and I like I like watching him. I wanted more of him. And he was the one that I never questioned from the moment they pulled him off of the firing range to give him that brief interview and welcome him to the team. I never questioned his involvement. Charles Martin Smith, same thing. He comes in, we meet him. He is sitting at Ness's desk. He is working on he's an accountant. He's an agent with the Treasury, and he is working on the books. And from the moment we meet him, I did not question him at all in terms of his place in the investigation and on the mission. I mean, do you agree with me on those two guys?
I think they're both fantastic here. I really do like them. And this is, at least for Andy Garcia, I mean, it's early-ish in his career. I mean, he'd been acting since the late 70s, but I mean, he hadn't been in huge parts yet, right?
No, and this one I think was just a great. I think this was a part that set him up for some other great things ahead.
Black Rain was just a couple years later, and that was a pretty big role. Internal Affairs, Godfather Part 3.
Yep.
I mean, it really following this, and I mean, he did 8 Million Ways to Die right before this. I think it was kind of a good lead-in to this film, and then just kind of a really snowballed for him from there, I think.
Yeah, and he ended up with a great couple of decades, and so I think he was just great in this film. I really, really liked him.
And Charles Martin Smith, he's one of those guys that he's got such an interesting look, and I think, I mean, even though I've never seen American Graffiti, like that's what I always think of him from.
Yeah, yep. As
he's
you
just
should.
That guy.
He's such a fantastic utility player, though. I mean, we talk about him. I think though I don't even think of American Graffiti. For me, it's Never Cry Wolf. That with the wolf and the rats and oh my goodness,
I've never seen that one. Is he the main guy?
Andy, yes, he is the main guy in that film, and he is just great. And it's such it's just a lonely man. It's a lonely man film. And he is terrific.
Does he get attacked and mauled by a bear?
He does not get attacked and mauled by a bear. Okay, you win on that. But the guy's got 87 credits, and he's just it's tough to find fault in the work that he does.
Yeah, he even popped up in the TV series The Untouchables after this. I do like him a lot, and I think that he's really fun the way he plays this character and how he kind of goes from being this kind of nebbish accountant sort of guy to getting all excited about bringing down Capone to, kind of going crazy. I mean, he kind of gets this berserker tendency when he gets a gun in his hand and goes a little nutso. And I think that's super fun to watch.
Yeah, it really is.
And he's another reason I really enjoy the Canadian sequence, because I just really like watching him really find his true joy in life.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. He does have a lot of fun, particularly his final stab as he runs and takes a drink of the booze that is leaking out of the barrel. I think he's got a little funny physical punchline to that.
Yes, he does.
Sean Connery. Connery. He's in this.
He's in this, yes, and he's Sean Connery. He's great. I don't know if have we talked about Sean Connery before on the show.
I don't think so. I don't think he's ever come up.
Oh no, of course on Indiana Jones: Last Crusade.
Yep. Boy, that was long enough ago. It feels like a different show, doesn't it?
Yes, that was a long.
It was
time
under
ago.
a different name, so that's why I don't remember.
That's right.
So Sean Connery won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for this, in addition to Empire Magazine's historical poll for Worst Film Accent.
Which I think is garbage.
I think that's garbage. It's totally garbage. He's a Scot, and he is playing he's playing I guess Malone is Irish. They're like right across. It's practically a river.
That's like a Coloradoan playing a Nebraskan. I mean,
right.
It's cake.
It's cake. It's cake. I had no problem with it, but I'm sure we'll hear from somebody who did. And I would like to be educated on the differences between an Irish and a Scottish accent in 1930s Chicago.
Stephen Smart might call and
1930s Chicago. Words. That's all I'm saying. Like when you add 1930s Chicago to the equation, is it possible that an accent could get munged somehow? Just throwing it out there.
I agree. Here is who he was up against for the Oscar. Albert Brooks from Broadcast News. Good performance there.
Excellent performance.
Morgan Freeman for Street Smart. I've never even seen Street Smart.
Yep.
What is that film?
No idea.
A New York journalist lies when his fake story about a pimp describes a real pimp up for murder.
That sounds about right.
Wow. Nominated for an Oscar. Moonstruck, Vincent Gardenia, great performance there. And Cry Freedom, Denzel Washington. So it's a good group there.
It was. I'm not sure what I would have given this to Connery.
Well, he's awfully good.
Hey,
Albert Brooks was awfully good too.
I think that the vulnerability displayed by Albert Brooks, if you take all those other films out of the equation altogether, the vulnerability displayed by Albert Brooks in that film is vastly underrated in his performance. And I think it shows more nuance as an actor than Connery displayed here, getting blown up.
I think you're right.
Oh, I was building a case.
I like your case. I think it was a very, very strong case. I agree with you.
Okay, there you go. I think this was a fairly pedestrian role for Mr. Connery. I think he has certainly done better work, and I think that he was a fine elder statesman in an ultimately not terribly memorable role, with the exception of the speech.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing. I mean, it's a fun role, and I think that's why he won an Oscar for it. And this happens from time to time. Sometimes an actor will have a really fun performance that is big and a little over the top, and it's really memorable, and people want to give them an award because they really like the fun element of that. Albert Brooks' character is not that fun. It's a more difficult film to watch. I mean, it's a fun film. I mean, I do enjoy broadcast news, but it's not like the Untouchables watching Sean Connery help take down Capone sort of fun, you know?
Right. I agree with you. I agree with you. He had just come off of The Name of the Rose the year prior as William of Baskerville, which is one of my favorites. I really enjoy that film in terms of the sort of mid 80s. And I was a big fan of the Umberto Eco books, and so I think I enjoyed his performance in that as the monk much more than as Jim Malone here. But of course, right before that was Highlander. So
he's given more meat in those. I mean, they're bigger performances.
Right. Okay, so there's Connery, and then of course De Niro.
Yeah, I mean. He's big.
He's 30. What is 30 pounds? He put on 30 pounds.
He's big in that sense too. Yes. Yeah. I mean, he was actually trying to put on more weight, but he couldn't get enough on. He was right between two films, and so couldn't get the weight on that he wanted to. So he did have to wear a fat suit, but he did get enough weight on him to pad his face out a little bit.
Yeah. It's funny the what De Palma wanted out of Capone in the film versus what De Niro wanted out of Capone in the film. And one of the things that I came across this passage discussing the two of them, Brian De Palma wanted Capone to seem as if he were the Sun King of Chicago, upon which all activity revolved. One reporter even asked Capone why he didn't run for the office of the mayor, since he already effectively ran things in Chicago. Robert De Niro's response as Al Capone is that he was simply a businessman, a man who provided the people of Chicago with an important service. Violence, he said, was never part of the operation. I think that's interesting. And I think it's interesting because I think my response to Al Capone, to De Niro's Al Capone, is that he's a charismatic character that seems like he was in a different movie.
Yes.
That it was like intercut between almost between a movie that I probably would have liked to watch, but it wasn't this one. He never quite lived up to the status of villain to me, even after the excessive violence with the baseball bat. I mean, he never quite lived up to the status of villain because I didn't feel like he and Ness were connected in any way. So there wasn't a real good versus evil. There was a kind of a dark businessman doing some things that you know are not good in this city, and a good guy who's chasing a phantom.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is we never get to see Capone doing anything that's Capone-ish.
Yeah.
he's always like going to the opera or walking down some stairs, or he's having his face, soaked with a hot towel so he can get shaved. It does always feel kind of disconnected from everything, and it's very frustrating. His speeches are fun. I mean, very big, over-the-top speeches, and I enjoy them. But it just never feels like he's there. It never feels like it's part of the same story. I mean, I agree completely with you, 100%.
Although, I should say, he did go find Capone's actual tailor and had him design some of his clothes. And even the silk underwear, which apparently De Niro was adamant that he had to wear so that he could feel, quote, in the character.
Yeah, he's one of those method guys that Connery probably mocked.
They also had a number of Capone's trinkets and tchotchkes on the shelves around the Capone sets. They were actual Capone things. And knowing that, I find it disappointing that there wasn't a cameo of Al Capone's vault. That's what I wanted to actually see. Just even a backgrounder of Al Capone's vault. So
that would have been funny.
What'd you think of Billy Drago, the thug, as Frank Nitti?
He is just one of those actors who's born to play just these sorts of thug characters. I mean, he's so creepy. Just looking at him, he fits the part so well. And he's great to cast in a role like this because you don't have to have him speak. You can just have him there, and his presence gives you that sense of, ooh, he's bad. He's doing something. He's nefarious of some evil means, and I think he plays it really well here.
He really does. And then when he does open his mouth, when he's the guy sitting in the car across the street from your house, telling you what a nice family you have. He is just diabolical. I find him just a really threatening individual, and I thought he was great in this, all the way to the very end. I'm right here, lawman, or treasury man. Arrest me. I thought it was just terrific.
Yeah, he's great. He is great.
Who else do you want to talk about?
He's a busy man, too. 110 credits.
Yeah. I wonder how many of those are actual thugs.
Right. What's the percentage of thugs that he has going on here?
Who else do you want to talk
about? Just a couple honorable mentions. I think that it's great seeing Patricia Clarkson here, turning up as Ness's wife. I believe this is her first screen performance.
She was great. She was adorable.
She's always great. I mean, she's just stinking great to watch. And she went from this to the Deadpool, and this is really a thankless role. It's just the wife sort of role, and I'm glad to see that she has found roles that are much more interesting. They give her much more exciting things to do, whether it's The Pledge or Lars and the Real Girl, or what is the one I'm trying to remember, where she's like the station agent in Pieces of April. Like all of those films I just think are just so great. She's just wonderful to watch in them.
Although here's a weird script thing. Like if you're going to fictionalize something, you've got Elliot Ness, right? He's a real person. I think his wife's real name was Edna. Why do you change that?
That's a good question.
I'm just saying. I mean, it's just kind of dumb.
Yeah.
When you have a real person to work from, why do you change that?
Does he ever say her name, Catherine?
I think they does, but not to her. I think it's about her. I think someone says something about her. Anyway.
Huh. Interesting.
Interesting, right? Okay.
Yeah. Very strange.
And your other honorable mention?
The other honorable mention, Clifton James turns up as the DA. And, I don't really have a whole lot to say about him other than it's fun to see him. I always think of him, and it's really a shame that I do, but I always think of him as the doofus sheriff who turns up in a couple James Bond films. He's so terrible. I mean, his bits in Live and Let Die and The Man with the Golden Gun are just... Oh, they're so terrible.
He's the worst.
He's so bad. But he's great here. He's also in like Cool Hand Luke. I mean, he's in some great stuff. I always think of him as the doofus sheriff, and I just feel bad about that.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
So that's the cast. I think one of the ways the film really does work well, when you get the people out of it, it's a pretty good location piece. They worked hard to shoot in iconic locations in and around Chicago, and the art and set decoration of these locations is really good to my eye.
No, it's beautiful, and that's even something else that Ebert pointed out. I think he said something where it's the movie is more interested in the era than it is in the actual story that it's telling. It's a beautiful, beautifully designed film. The production is just gorgeous. I mean, they did a great job of finding great real locations in Chicago that they could transform into these places. They had the costume design. I mean, Giorgio Armani coming in and designing costumes. I've just made some great looking stuff, and I mean, just the team here that for production, Patricia von Brandenstein, William Elliott, and Hal Gaussman just did a gorgeous job of putting stuff together that really felt great. I mean, that's something I really enjoyed about the Capone elements, was just how lush, I mean, how ridiculously lush everything was, and how kind of plain and barren everything was that Ness and Malone and his team had.
Oh yeah, and the way we get to exist in these old walk-ups, and the police station is just beaten down. And you're right, my goodness, the hotel that was just gorgeous. The wood was like butter. I mean, it was just, everything about it was beautiful. And really capitalized on, I think, this kind of noir vibe that I think they did. They executed well with the camera, a lot of great angles, and just captured. And like you said, the down angles that they used to get these, looking down on Capone, looking high up stairwells, looking down on the baby carriage. I mean, it really gives you such a strong sense of place throughout the film that I think is just really solid.
And I like that they went to lengths to actually not overcast it. They said, you know what, there were a lot fewer people living back then, so let's not overfill the shots with people. And you see that when you've got those great wide shots of the streets. They have people and vehicles and all that, but it's not just like big city crowds, and I think that works really nicely.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the all of that to me is kicked off with the opening credits, which I'm just really attracted to these credits.
They're great.
They're beautiful. They are digital credits coming from Richard Greenberg, who is also responsible for Superman and Alien and Altered States and The Dead Zone, and he's just done so much stuff. And many of his earlier credits of these great films were all practical credits. They were all like camera shots of type and things like that. And this one was one of the first that he had done digitally. All the shadows, these long shadows. It's all a very slow movement of these long shadows across a plane, and slowly we pull back and we see that the shadows come from a backlit. The word Untouchables is backlit, and there's just sort of the shadows of the Untouchables is what provides the background to the actual credit roll. And that was digital. That was a new thing in '87 for this legendary credits agency. Visual agency. So I thought that was really great. And his comment on it was, as the art director was saying that it was boring. He said, my art director kept saying it's boring. And I looked at him, I said, it's supposed to be boring. It has to take its time. He said, I didn't want it to feel rushed. And I think it really plays very, very well opening this scene. And in fact, that graphic, the final graphic that they land on, works so well for promotion. The way it was used in all the posters and just the general logo type throughout the promotion of the film. I think it shows how well that visual plays.
I think what pairs really nicely with the title is Ennio Morricone's score. It's a fantastic score. It's got some great pieces in here, and the opening title bit over that title sequence you just talked about is just so great. It's just such a great piece of music.
I really agree. This is one that is really easy to listen to as a standalone piece of music. This is a fantastic score. I only have two problems with it, and it's not problems with the music itself. It's problems with the pairing to the sequence. The first one is the nitty chase on the rooftops, which feels a little bit too cartoony, frenetic for me. And I'm totally open to just sort of having a misread on that. I get that one's, that it could work really well for you depending on how you hear this. And I gather you probably like it.
Well, I think what you just said, I think helps me be a little more okay with it. The fact that the music is great, it just may not necessarily work in the particular sequences.
Yes.
Right? And I think that, Morricone is somebody who's written some really strong scores. And sometimes his scores work really well with the films, and sometimes the score works, it's almost better to listen to it separate from the film, because it's kind of, you've got to, when you have strong music like that, what you're showing on screen has to be really strong too. It's like matching a nice wine with the right dinner.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's going to create imbalance.
So I'm glad you say it like that, because the other sequence I find the pairing is offensive, I think somebody would say if they were finding trouble with the wine. This is the death of Malone sequence, when Connery gets shot and he has all the crap in his eyes, and old 2x4 comes to his rescue. And Connery, I think the problem I have is that I don't believe Connery is dying. I believe he's like choked on a bone or something, and he's just gagging a lot, and it's like the worst scene. It's like the only thing that could have made it worse in this movie is if they were doing it on horseback. Like it was just a ridiculously lampoonable sequence of death, and the music was so rich and lush and soap operatic that I felt like the pairing was, well, it was off. It was just off, and otherwise it was stupid. That's the other word I would use for it.
Yeah, again, I think the music is fine.
Yes.
It's just the particular situation, and I agree. I think that the death scene may have been a little much. The actual attack, I enjoy the stalking of Malone.
Oh, yes.
The killing of Malone. All that stuff's great. The music is great through that sequence. But yeah, the death is a little, it can be read a little maudlin.
It's tough. I never saw the original show. This was in 1959. I think it ran from 1959 to 63. Elliot Ness was played by Robert Stack, produced by Desilu Productions, Desi Arnaz. Do you ever see any of the original Stack Untouchables?
I didn't. But yeah, Robert Stack won an Emmy in this series. So it's one of those that... I think that what I read was, for its time, it was actually kind of considered pretty violent, and some people were kind of up in arms about showing this much violence on TV. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It was followed up, obviously, by the film, and then another TV show, which I also never saw.
I didn't either. I never saw that one.
But did you play the video game?
I didn't play the video game. It's amazing how this story, Elliot Ness's story, has kind of expanded and just become so prevalent in stories of crime fighting. It's not just even these films. I think that his book that came out in 1957, I believe it was posthumously, actually. I think that it's kind of even what is that other movie that came out? Not Gangsters. There's been a couple movies actually that kind of dealt with the same sort of stuff, and I think that they kind of pulled from this story of these guys, this team going out and fighting crime, and I think that is something that it gets people excited. People want to kind of jump on board with that, so I think it's very easy to kind of pull from a story like Ness's and want to tell the story.
I think it's because, well, first of all, the crime itself of the period is legendary, right? It's legendary to the point of being so easy to fictionalize, right? This sort of gangs and Prohibition era gang crime. It's become iconic, and so we had to put a good guy that was up to the task, and his name became the name associated with the iconic archetype of good guy of the period. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like, he's the one who got it, even though what we're seeing on screen is no longer Elliot Ness. It is this amalgam of hero character traits that were appropriate for the period. It fits with our expectation of the good that needs to fight the evil in 1930.
Right.
And in that respect, I think we can let go of some of the historical inaccuracies that we talked about at the beginning that tend to get stuck in my teeth.
The TV show actually also spawned, at the time in the 50s when TV crime dramas were prevalent, they tended to be either there was a stalwart police officer that they followed, or a detective and his trusty sidekick partner, or the lone wolf private eye police detective. And those were kind of the stories that you had. This kind of introduced the whole idea of this group, this team. And I think it's interesting that, I don't know if I've traced the TV threads, but I think you may be able to even pull from something like this and lead it to something like Mission Impossible, where you had a team of crime fighters in a different scope. So it's interesting how something like this could kind of expand and create all these different types of stories. Well,
and very much Mission Impossible. Now the name escapes me, but the main guy, Peter Graves in 1966, really cuts the Elliot Ness character in Mission Impossible, kind of building the team and kind of leading the team, and that's sort of the archetype that I think is carried through the Elliot Ness character. Elliot Ness, I'm looking at the IMDb page around the Elliot Ness character, is really great. We see him played by the Elliot Ness, fictionalized Elliot Ness in Boardwalk Empire, played by Jim Trufrost. He was played by Louis Balletta in My Father, My Don. Nicholas Lee in Supernatural, the television show. The Speakeasy, played by Earl Browning III. Let's see. He was played by Dan Aykroyd on Saturday Night Live. It's probably 30 different Elliot Nesses, all played by these different interpretations, different actors. So it's an interesting character that has grown far beyond its lineage.
Well, I think you said it. It's the sort of thing that can become parody, especially when he's such a goody two shoes sort of character.
Well, that becomes a parody. I would stick to archetype as a hero, but you're right. That goody two shoes is definitely a parody,
which is how they played it here.
Yeah, I think so.
Which is what makes it parodiable.
I like
to make these words up.
Parodiable, I think, is
paradoxical.
Paradoxical.
I don't know.
So, how did it do?
This film, it did pretty well for itself.
Yeah? Like, how well are we talking?
Well, it cost $25 million to make in 1987 dollars, which is about $51.25 million. So, it's a pretty good budget for a little crime movie. And I think, it was at a time when De Palma needed to, I think he'd had a few flops and he needed to kind of get a nice studio pick made to kind of help him get a boost, and so he could go do some of his other projects. It ended up making domestically a little over $76 million, which is about $156 million in adjusted dollars. So yeah, it did well for itself. This film ended up making about almost $900,000 per finished minute adjusted.
Not bad for a period gangster piece.
Not too bad.
Not bad at all.
And it ended up getting, 4 Oscar nominations? Didn't win any, but yeah, it was the best art direction, set decoration, and best costume design and best score.
Outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we should probably rank it.
Let's do it.
I think you should head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. And the way this works is you can rank your films and create a little stack ranking of your very favorite films. Every film you rank, it's a single elimination against one other film How you rank it is totally up to you. Maybe it's your gut feeling about the film. Maybe it's you're thinking deeply about the direction and the color and the editing, or maybe it's just what you want to watch right now. But that's what we do, and that's what we're going to do right now.
We've kind of created somehow a new starting point that seems to be pretty consistent now. The Untouchables or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Oh.
I'm with Oh Brother.
I'm very firmly with Oh Brother.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's funny how times change your opinion on a film. I really used to like Untouchables a lot more.
Yeah, and my memory, if you had asked me before we watched this film this week, I would have probably said The Untouchables.
Yeah. The Untouchables or Taxi Driver. I would do Taxi Driver. Rock in a hard place.
You know, if I have to go, even off of just straight up De Niro performances, I have to give it to Taxi Driver.
There you go. Let's see, The Untouchables or Escape from New York.
Well, Escape from New York is pretty bad.
It's not bad. It just feels cheap. It feels cheap. That was, I think, our problem with that one, is it felt like the world building was a little sloppy.
It's so cheap, it's bad, I think, is the problem.
I'm a little torn here. But I think I will agree with you. I'm assuming I'm going to be agreeing with you saying The Untouchables, because at least it does have some really big iconic moments.
Yeah, right. And Untouchables doesn't feel cheap. It feels the exact opposite of cheap. It is a beautiful, beautifully articulated playground.
Yes. The Untouchables or The Game? I'm going to go The Game.
I'm going to go The Game.
That hasn't popped up in a while. The Untouchables or Christine? I'm going to do The Untouchables.
Go with The Untouchables.
Yeah, we had some issues with Christine. The Untouchables or Detour? 1945 film noir.
I'm going to have to go with Detour, I think.
Me too. The Untouchables or Ninotchka? Little Greta Garbo action.
I'm going to be with The Untouchables on this one.
Yeah, I think we had some issues with Ninotchka. It just didn't have an amazing story. And, that leaves it at 184 on our chart, Pete. 184, right between Detour and Ninotchka.
Does that hurt your feelings a little bit? Like, my expectation was that it was going to be much, much better than that. And, it's just smarts that it didn't.
I feel like it's in the right place. But, in my memory, I had felt like this was just a top-notch film. And it's definitely a step down from there.
Truly. So what does it do for your star rating?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I feel like it's down to maybe I'm torn. Like, I want to say 2.5 or 3, and I feel like I might bump it up to 3 just because it does have some really, really strong sequences, and I think that De Palma does play a strong hand at doing some really interesting things here.
I was going to say the same thing. I was going to give it a 3, and I can't believe that I'm giving it a 3 strictly on the back of De Palma.
Hey, he's done some great stuff.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah. All right, so that's a 3 for both of us.
That's a 3,
then, huh?
A solid 3.
All right, that's where we landed then. 3 stars over on Letterboxd.
All right, where do we go from here?
Well, in our little series here, we're going to be doing the only one of our series that is actually based on a David Mamet play, and that is Glengarry Glen Ross.
So this was written by Mamet as a play, adapted by Mamet to a film, but not directed by Mamet.
Right, James Foley directed it, 1992.
And I think this is, when you think of David Mamet and his participation in the world of cinema, my hunch is you probably have this film in your mind.
I do.
Yeah. This is the anchor.
Really is.
Yeah. If you tell me that there is no Mametism in this film next week, I'm going to come to Arizona. And we're going to have words.
I think I'll save you the plane ticket.
Okay, good. Well, I'm looking forward to that, Andy. I think that's going to be a good conversation. The other thing we have coming up next week, we've got another TNR short. And this one is an editorial piece from our very own Once and Future King, Steve Sarmento. I'm very excited to get this one out in the feed, so be on the lookout for that on Tuesday. And the regular show will be back. We'll be back with Glengarry Glen Ross, Thursday, Friday-ish.
Perfect.
I gotta go to bed.
I've got to go send one of his to the morgue.
Amazon has delivered once again.
Oh yes,
and I think Andy, our Amazon participants this week, they actually agree more with us, or we with them.
I think they did. Yeah, I got a 1-star by Play Golf and Tennis. Says terrible, not based on much fact, and way too Hollywood. Wow, this was terrible. So Ness has to get his nerve from someone else, and Nettie did not commit suicide? There was a sprinkle of truth and a lot of unnecessary Hollywood fat in this movie, and it was not even entertaining. Worst ending ever. Catch it on cable.
That was a surprise twist at the end.
It is. It's like make sure you catch this one.
Exactly. Mine, Johnny Pasta. Johnny Pasta wrote, this was a recent one, another recent one from just August of last year. Don't get me wrong here, but Kevin Costner was definitely miscast for the part of Elliot Ness. He should stick to his niche with baseball movies and such. If it weren't for De Niro and Connery in this movie, it would totally nosedived. For me, I'll pass, and felt like I wasted 2 hours of my day watching this. Costner was just not convincing enough for me. He don't belong in gangster movies is all I am saying. So take it for what it's worth here. Johnny Pasta. August 2015.
Johnny Pasta.
So people,
and tennis.
Yeah. So people didn't really jive with that, and that was that's definitely a subset of what the haters felt.
It is,
I think.
Yeah. So I think you're right.
Here endeth the lesson. Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe we have been having in-depth conversations about movies since 2011.
You are telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
Season 5 had some great adaptations, like our Meryl Streep Oscar-nominated performances series. We covered adaptations like Kramer vs. Kramer, Sophie's Choice, and The French Lieutenant's Woman.
It's a real Sophie's Choice between those books. You see what I did there?
Yeah. And I don't think it's quite at the level of a real Sophie's Choice.
We also did Snowpiercer for our Bong Joon-ho series, adapted from the French graphic novel Le Transpersonnage. Man, I love that movie.
We had our 2-part 1939 series that included adaptations like Gone with the Wind, Ninotchka, The Women, and The Hound of the Baskervilles.
A number of those 1939 movies, like Goodbye, Mr. Chips, also tied into our recent 1940 Academy Award Best Picture nominee series.
Our naughty children horror series had creepy adaptations like The Bad Seed, Village of the Damned, The Innocents, and Children of the Corn.
For our Hayao Miyazaki series, we talked about his take on Lupin III with the Castle of Cagliostro, plus his own The Wind Rises.
Some great listener choice picks too, Viridiana and The Great Escape.
And for our David Mamet Wright series, The Verdict, The Untouchables, and Glengarry Glen Ross.
Plus, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang from our Shane Black series, adapted from Brett Halliday's novel, Bodies Are Where You Find Them.
Dive into the sources for all of these at thenextreel.com/originals.
Every book you buy helps support the show. Check out thenextreel.com/originals today and find your next read.